Well, it's interesting because I like to, obviously you will read the information and much of it makes more sense when you've met the parents.
Does your experience literature and training back to university days, or is there like...
No, it's more the former.
Yep,
It has to do with your training.
Yep.
And then the many years you have, presumably, of sort of general mental health practice in the family.
And so for you, what's that training been? Where did you begin the passage of life to become where you are in this job?
Well, it's interesting. I started off doing a business degree, a marketing degree, and a part of that was behavioural science, I think it was called.
So thank you for coming this afternoon. I think we're going to just start talking about generally your practice.
Yeah.
Because it intersects a little bit with mine in the family law space.
Yeah.
So you're a family report writer at the Relation Space. Can you explain what that is on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. So mostly I'm meeting with families for the purpose of ultimately producing a report.
Yep.
So I meet with children,
Yep.
children together with the parents.
Yep.
And then the parents usually after that individually.
Yep.
That's sometimes mostly done remotely because they have already met me, so to speak.
Because they've come in
They have come
physically.
in. That's how I like to sort of schedule my reports. Colleagues do it differently. Everyone has. Some people might meet the parents first and so forth, and then meet the children. I do it the other way around. But much of 90%, 95% of my work is related to producing a report that then is usually used as part of their family court proceedings.
Okay.
I do some one-to-one work as a psychologist, so to speak, offering people appointments. And again, most of those people who I see in that capacity are either involved in or have been involved in or are about to be involved in family proceedings. Family law proceedings.
And when you talk to them on an individual basis, independently of a family report, what tends to be the conversation that you're helping them about?
Well, it's interesting because many parents speak of the bamboozlement I think they feel in relation to family law proceedings and the psychological impact that has on them. Their worry about their children, their worry about themselves, on all sorts of fronts, really. And it's because I have increasingly familiarised myself with proceedings, largely due to being a family report writer, I'm able to help people. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can certainly share my thoughts on what to expect to some degree. And help them then manage what they are going through, what they tell me, what they report, so to speak.
So is that about the proceedings rather than about what's causing them to be needing the support through separation?
It's probably a bit of both. There can be times if they're anticipating a hearing, for example, or have been recently at a hearing, we will discuss that and the outcome, I suppose, their reaction to it. They're trying to make sense of it. Did it go how they wanted? Sometimes they're shocked, sometimes they're pleased. It varies. Otherwise, it's about coping as a parent. Sometimes your parenting role has been drastically reduced or it's increased hugely. It depends on the circumstances. And it's about how to manage in that way and being a parent in its sort of day-to-day sense and you know, all the worries parents have, school, their child's welfare, their health, their mental health in particular, sometimes many aspects, not unlike you might do if you were a psychologist doing parenting work in a more ordinary day-to-day general
outside
sort of practice, so to speak. But in the parents I see there's sort of a sword of Damocles there, which is their concern and often their heightened anxiety about how long these proceedings are taking and where they will go.
So there is, and I experience this in the sense of observing it every day, there must be a whole level of anxiety within a family law context
Oh,
that is distinct from the anxiety that people suffer on a daily basis before even coming near the court. And that's a whole new level.
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember when I was an undergrad psychology student, you know, we were very much aware of these studies that consistently showed in terms of the top 10 most stressful life events, it was death, divorce and moving house.
Yeah.
And you've got people who have usually 2, if not 3 of those, because often they have family members who are either very unwell, if they've got, you know, older parents, or they're certainly managing divorce, and it's usually the people I see, it's usually a fairly high conflict, you know, drawn out, very stressful experience. They're usually moving, and sometimes frequently, because that can often be a case.
Compelled by either just having to leave the home, or the home is being sold, or
absolutely
another arrangement.
Exactly. Sometimes people are sort of back with their parents when that's not what they expected at all, you know, 5 years or 2 years or even a year prior. So people feel their life has been upended in many ways. So they're coming to terms with that, and they kind of have to come to terms with that because they've got proceedings which they have to prepare for and invest in and, of course, pay for. So there's all of that as well in the background. So some of those things, they wax and wane, so it can depend what's foremost in people's minds, and it's up to them what they want to discuss.
So do you do treating doctors' reports in the family court as well if you have an individual client that's come to you and they need to demonstrate the benefits they've derived from psychotherapeutic treatment?
Yes, sometimes, Some people will avail of a referral through their doctor to get psychological support in the context of very high stress. And Medicare allows that. And often people meet criteria for, you know, mood disorders or anxiety problems as well. So it's a very valid sort of referral for a psychological period of psychological treatment anyway. But often most people probably wouldn't have considered that if they weren't in the midst of proceedings. Many might, but there would be some whose first time speaking to a psychologist is because of the position they're in.
And I think there'd be a lot of people that wouldn't necessarily know, and people in the legal profession would know, but a difference between what is a family report as distinct from a treating doctor's report. Are you able to just say what a family report is in the family law context?
Yes, I mean, you're meeting all the family members. You're usually meeting both parents. You're sometimes meeting grandparents. You're certainly meeting the children. You're possibly speaking to schools to get some information there that's helpful. If the parents you're assessing for a family report are involved with a professional, a mental health professional of some description, you would probably want to speak to them usually. So you're doing a fairly comprehensive report. You're often looking at a lot of material that you're provided with as well, health notes, if there's been police involvement, criminal matters sometimes. A letter to a doctor really is about that person's treatment in the room with you once a week, once a fortnight. You're giving an overview, you're giving your view, and you're usually saying re-refer them or continue their referral. You know that it's an outcome. To maximise the number of appointments Medicare will help you with. You know, so there's a sort of a practical element to it as well. But GPs just want to know what's going on with their patient, because that's a patient who they would normally have had a relationship with for many years, and will continue. You know, beyond my involvement.
But your report is a concluded view at the end.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
and
you're asked to give a view in accordance with the...
And there's a letter of instruction, and that letter of instruction would usually identify a number of areas you have to cover.
Yes, it usually reflects the court orders that would probably preceded by a week or 2 weeks, you know, that kind of thing. Sometimes if people don't necessarily have court orders but still want a report, the letter of instruction will have the only instructions you will follow, so to speak. But I think they're taken, as I understand it, from the relevant legislation. So
I think that's right. So how do you find that? Because you receive thousands of pages. You receive a demand, if you like, by the court or by the parties of what you're to write about. How do you approach it?
It's helpful because they're essentially terms of reference, you know, and they help you keep the report, I suppose, on point. And presumably this is what the the judge, for example, or the legal representatives want to know about to help their client. You're writing it from the best interest of the child angle.
Yes.
And as I understand it, that's quite a unique position to be in, because you're not representing one party or the other. Your review is for the benefit of the child or the children. So the terms of reference that you're given, taken from the legislation, help you hone in what I suppose you could conceivably, because you gather in a lot of information, you could give lots of views, but they might not be particularly helpful because they're not on point per se. So being focused, being told to be focused is probably quite helpful. And
how long does that take to read, even if you assume a minimum of, I don't know, 200 pages of documents from the court and maybe up to 1,000? How long does it take to assimilate that, and how do you approach it?
Well, it's interesting because I like to, obviously you will read the information, and much of it makes more sense when you've met the parents and you've spoken to them, and then you do a clinical interview. So that's a fairly standardized interview. You'd ask them a little bit about their younger years, their growing up, their education and so forth, their health and physical health, those kinds of things. The material makes more sense when when they've given their account of it as well. And then it's always helpful to reread it. And you might have some more questions. So you would often have follow-ups with parents once you've met them once. You nearly always speak to them twice just to clarify a few issues usually, make sure I've understood things. So it's a bit not necessarily abstract, but you get a better understanding when you've met the person about whom in relation to whom that material has been provided to you. Particularly, they might have involvement with police, and it's good to hear their side of it, because obviously you have the police's view, because that's what's written down. But both parties would have another view, and that's important too, I think, to
and then
incorporate.
Well, you're obviously not a determiner of anything, but you're just giving the points that you've observed about the people and what they say about each other and what the police records say about them, and trying to sort of summarise that into a direction.
I think it's important because it's not about making a judgment.
Exactly.
But you can only go on what you've been informed of and what you've been told. And I'm very glad I'm not making any determination of any sort. But you can speak to likelihoods and probabilities, and you can certainly speak to what effect an event or a series of events or incidents would have on a child. You can certainly speak to that, and I think that's what the court wants ultimately.
Absolutely. But does your ability to do that, is that grounded in literature and training back to university days, or is there like a sort of a format that your regulatory body says this is what to look for in these types of reports?
No, it's more the former. It has to do with your training, and then the many years you have presumably of sort of general mental health practice in family services, child and family services, and you draw on that to again be child focused. You do learn a lot when you come into family report writing, the legislation, the terms of reference, the role of various people, but and it's quite a steep learning curve, from my experience at least, very interesting learning curve. But you're always reminded as your role as a clinician. And I think again, when you fall back to that, if you do get a bit lost in the mire of all these allegations and counter allegations and material that can be thousands of pages sometimes, you go back to your training to help you understand what you want to come through.
And so for you, what's that training been? Where did you begin the passage of life to become where you are in this job?
Well, it's interesting. I started off doing a business degree, a marketing degree, and a part of that was behavioural science, I think it was called, which I loved. The business side of it I didn't love, and I was terrible at it and failed. So I jumped ship and started a psychology degree, and from there on in, the elements of psychology that I had done in my business degree, the one I started and left, were what drew me towards doing psychology as a full-time degree. And I also had a very sort of respectful lecturer in psychology during my business degree. And she was very encouraging. She goes, well, you know, do make the move, because most people were saying, no, stay the course. But it wasn't for me, but psychology was. So I did an undergraduate degree, and then I did some further study in the UK, and I ended up then becoming a clinical psychologist.
Did you grow up in the UK?
No, I grew up in Ireland.
You did, okay.
And left to study, with no intention of necessarily not returning, but the opportunities were more so in the UK.
But the psychology degree, was that in the UK, and then you went for the further study?
Definitely. My first degree was in Ireland, undergraduate degree. And then I did postgraduate studies in the UK.
In London, or?
No, near London, just outside a place called Colchester, which isn't far from London. And then I moved then over to Wales, and I studied and worked there for a long time, many years, and then I was in... Where was I then? Oh, Bristol, that's right. And going up and down to London when I was in Bristol, because it's a bit closer. So I was linked to a clinic in London called the Tavistock Clinic, which is pretty well known in the UK. It's a big mental health training provider. And that was very formative in terms of the work I do now and how I write, particularly the latter half of my reports and thinking about
what
things.
Was the name of that course, or the extra study after your degree? What was that type of education?
So I did a master's in child neuropsychology.
Oh, really? Wow.
Then I did a postgraduate doctorate in clinical psychology. And then I did another doctorate in child psychotherapy.
Wow.
At the Tavistock.
Wow. Amazing.
So I had studied and trained for a long time, but I was working as an NHS employee the whole way through. In the UK, it's fortunate enough where you have some professions where they will pay you to train.
So does that mean that you're going around NHS hospitals or NHS GP clinics?
I was, particularly when I was in Wales. I was doing placements in different clinical placements, so working with children, working with adults, working with older adults, and then the child psychotherapy was in one clinic for 5 years, so that was a chance to do long-term work with children and adolescents.
So what did you do in child psychotherapy? What does that process involve as a job?
Well, that particular profession, it's a core profession in the United Kingdom. Not so much here, but it's a core profession in the NHS, and it teaches you to work psychoanalytically, drawing on those theories of Freud and his followers, in terms of treating mental health problems.
In children and
adolescents, and to some degree working with parents as parents, but you're working with them as well, thinking about their experiences from that model. And it's a long training. It's a minimum of 6 years, often in just one clinic. So it's a fairly dedicated sort of undertaking.
So the study is combined with work, though. You're working full-time and studying full-time.
Exactly,
And that work is actually spending time with children, doing the psychotherapy? Or
yes, it is. It is.
Not sort of training on people, but learning by doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, being in the room and understanding a child, or indeed anyone from, I suppose, 4 up to about 18, really, realistically speaking, getting a glimpse into, I suppose, their inner life, the workings of aspects of their minds that you're trying to sort of get an insight into. And then you bring about change by reflecting that insight back to them in ways that they can manage and understand.
And does it work?
It does work. It does work. I would say that it's because it's a lengthy process. It's probably viewed as quite an expensive process. It's labour intensive. It's time intensive. But I think it brings about a kind of change that you won't see in other therapies.
Really?
But then there are other therapies that will bring about other types of change that you wouldn't see with psychotherapy either. So it works for certain people at certain times in their lives. Definitely.
When you think about where you are now, and you've obviously been in a psychology stream in your life since probably early 20s. I have. Do you sort of, because I do in my job sometimes, look back and go, when you think of yourself at 12 and 13 and 14, how did it make sense, based on what you know about yourself as a younger person, that you are where you are now? Or is it, how did I get here?
Well, I think it does. I was always a very sort of observant person. I think even when I was growing up, and not necessarily in the midst of things, at least not initially. I would often be watching people, seeing who was the ringleader.
Staying out of the ringleader.
Who not to cross.
Who
might be an ally. And I think that led to my interest in why people do what they do, particularly in relation to other people.
Yeah.
And it's something have always found very interesting. There's a strand of psychology called social psychology. So it's a bit like sociology, but it's not so much the study of groups. It's more the study of an individual in a group.
Okay.
And to me, that was always really, really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved that, actually.
And so were you, what sort of group were you in with parents? Were you one of 2, 3 or 4?
One of 9.
I was going to say, I was about to buy the Irish family scenario.
Yeah.
And where were you in that?
9.
You were number 9?
I'm 9 of 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you think about whether your rank, if I put it that way, just numerically in the sibling stack, has any sort of social impact on you later, or cause and effect type of observation?
Well, I think, in some ways, by the time I've, say, finished school, there was always an expectation for me that I would go on to higher education, university, and it was almost a given. And a lot of people I went to school with did. But my older siblings, that wasn't necessarily a given at all. You know, no. And you would be thinking of, well, what are you going to do to earn money as soon as you? Whereas I didn't have that pressure, for example, due to different reasons. So life would have been very different had I been 1 or 2 of 9 as opposed to 9 of 9.
In your particular family,
definitely,
because the opportunities for them were different,
and the shifts in the country that were around by the time I went to university in the early 90s compared to when they would have gone, say, in the late 70s, something like that. Huge shifts in the country, economically, socially. Whereas I ended up, mind you, going to the UK as well, but that was just to study. All of them went probably with a view to never coming back.
So are you the only one of your siblings that has been to university?
No, but I was the one who's followed the first, I should say, who followed the normal trajectory of doing it after school.
Okay.
And the next step, once you're 17, 18. Many of them went back because they wanted to do it and did it
differently as adults.
Exactly, as a mature student, or whatever the term is. And some of them did quite a bit, actually. But 1 of 9, I can't believe that. I'm the oldest of 3, and it's sort of interesting, just everybody. It's always lovely to know where somebody is and see if you can work out, but I would never have worked out the youngest of 9. Youngest of 9, and bored, obviously by the time I was born, my family was very big, and then there were grandchildren not long after I was born, so it was always an expanding family. So somebody had to be the quiet, observant one. And
well, that sort of does make some sense. You're just watching this whole family around you and trying to figure out how to fit within it.
And when your siblings are adults and you're a child, you see them very differently.
I'm sure you do.
You see them as, well, they're parents. They are. I know they're my siblings, but they're proper grown-up people. I'm only 8. They're grown-ups. And they were. And
do you think that position in your family has impacted how you see adults now and relationships between children and their parents in your practice?
Oh, it's an interesting question. I think I suppose I was aware of not so much the relationship between parents and their children, but that some of the dynamics that were there, I was seeing it all the time. And I suppose when you're a child, you just experience that in relation to your own parents, and then you probably become more aware of your friends' relationship to their parents as you get a bit older. But I was sort of seeing it really from a very, very young age. And seeing other children who weren't my siblings being parented. So I was sort of somewhat detached from it because they come and go.
But when you now, in a family rapport context, see a younger child or the youngest child, can you relate at all sometimes to a dynamic and go, oh, I can really understand where that person's coming from?
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, because there's sometimes a pressure that you have to you either you have to be very different or you have to follow them. I suppose it depends on the family.
Yes.
Yeah. So if there's an expectation that all the rest did that, so why do you have to be awkward and different?
Yeah.
Or well, look, do you want to end up like them? That sort of these kind of things that do get sort of almost casual comments, but they become sort of a lingua franca almost within certain families. I think your position in relation to your siblings is very important to note in family reports. Yeah,
I'm sure it is.
Very, very important. Yeah.
And what about how you observing the differences? Let's just say you have 3 children and they're age of 10, 7 and 5 or something. I mean, you would observe incredibly different personalities between those 3, and especially if boy and girl, and then also, but you've got to sort of put them in a group from the point of view of the court, because it's generally, I think you'd probably agree, observed that courts prefer to keep children as a group together rather than separate, unless one is really different in terms of time they spend with the parents.
Yeah, because you're always mindful that usually a sibling relationship is lifelong and will outlast a child-parent relationship.
Yes.
That's usually the course of things, nature's way, so to speak. Often, and sibling relationships are important when you're young, and they're very important later on in life too. There is a source of support, someone who has known you all your life. Yeah. So you want to keep in mind, how do you balance, the children will only be children for a certain number of years, really, as well as, but, you don't want to set one against the other, so to speak. It's probably been a little bit sort of laying it on too heavily, but you have to be mindful of what they will get from that relationship beyond the age of 18,
and
20.
Therefore promoting it.
Yeah, exactly. But
ultimately,
because it's a resource.
A group of 3 or 4 of that age are more likely to stick together, or be found that it's beneficial for them to stick together of that age. But you're going to have such divergent personalities within it. It must be fascinating to watch, as you would, those 4 children and how they're affected by what's going on in the family separation.
Absolutely, and you have to be mindful. There'll be some siblings, particularly when they're adolescents, the last thing they want to do is hang around with their siblings.
Yes.
So forcing them to do it, or recommending they do that, even if they've clearly stated, I don't want to. I've got X, Y, Z to do, better things to do. That's. I think you have to allow some flexibility, or recommend, I suppose, some flexibility in that regard, because it's natural. It's not a worrying thing. Sometimes the distance can help when a kid's 15, 16 and just wants to be away from the family home anyway.
Yeah.
And usually they're often a bit irritable, and they're not much fun to be around for the younger siblings, but they can come back when they're a bit older, when they're a bit more settled in their own identity, and the relationship can get re-established.
And so in that sense, a person more of that age are more likely to allow more flexibility than a person who might be 10 or 8 or 7.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's realistic. Yeah.
And then that there's a big question in the legal system, in the family law context of, when does weight get given to a child's view?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in the community would say, well, after 14, you can't tell a 14-year-old boy what to do. But of course, that's not the law. But how is it that how do you assess a child's view, and whether that is a view that a judge should take into account or give weight to?
Yeah, it's a very good question, isn't it? I suppose when you meet a child, you do get a sense over the years of whether you feel what they're saying is sort of spontaneous and coming from them, as opposed to, sometimes you meet a child and it's very obvious, it's rehearsed, and it's probably something someone else has put into their minds, so to speak. That doesn't happen terribly often, but I have witnessed what I believe to be the case.
So,
but those
Yeah.
children who you feel are speaking from the heart, so to speak, and are drawing on their experience of one parent versus the other, for example, not just what you're told in an affidavit, but actually how they can describe their relationship with their parent in a very genuine way, then I think you have to give some weight to their wishes in that regard.
And you can tell that. You can, or at least discern it's more serious than, it's more authentic than an idea that's been given to them. Because there's also the idea that's been given to them is one thing, and then there's an idea that they've adopted for survival or for a sort of a form of new relationship in a separating family.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, I think it's not. I wouldn't say you don't want to assume that you're always right all the time.
No, of course.
That's probably not very helpful. But you do get a feel when you've been a clinician for a long time about how people communicate, not just what they say, but how they say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can be as sure as you can be. And that's all you can say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you get cross-examined about that.
Indeed, yeah.
And how's that? Because
that's
most
nerve-wracking.
lawyers don't get cross-examined. They only do
yeah.
it. So how does it actually feel?
Well, it's. I mean, it's interesting to see to have that experience. I think you're worried you'll be sort of ridiculed or torn apart or humiliated, but I think people are sort of curious actually about what you really think. Ultimately, that's what's come across to me each time I've done it. They are curious as to I suppose they want an answer, I suppose, a certain type of answer, but they also are genuinely interested in your view. So it's a challenging process, but there's nothing really you shouldn't be able to at least attempt to give a decent response to based on what you've
and you would find, I'm sure,
assessed
that
and found out.
The questions that are put to you are not questions that you necessarily have thought about because you've got your instructions. But so some questions, I'm sure, come as a bit of a surprise, but you just draw upon the experience you've had with the family to resonate that in the witness box and answer according to your experience.
Yes, and sometimes you're drawing on your general sort of experience as well, not just with that family, because you can be asked questions about, well, what might happen in 5 years' time were these conditions in place, and you can only draw on what you've seen happen in other families you've worked with, not just in the family court, but as a clinician in a general sort of mental health service with children and families. So again, you can draw on that, and so long as you've made it clear that's what you're drawing on, I suppose that's all you can
that's right.
really say. Yeah.
So your position as a family report writer in a witness box is distinctly different from the mother or the father or another family member because they're scrutinised a lot more directly, I think you'd find.
Well, actually, I don't know.
Have you never seen it?
I haven't actually. No, I haven't. When I was sort of starting, it was very much recommended to observe some hearings, but it was during COVID when I started, and actually that proved very tricky.
Yeah, it's all
and
online,
it was all online, and then getting access, through Teams and everything, never sort of worked out. Technology sort of failed last minute, or people were too busy to sort of answer your request to attend. It wasn't because they didn't want to, they just kind of had other matters. So in the end, I didn't actually do that. So I don't actually know. I do hear from parents, of course, those who I work with individually.
Yes.
They tell me a bit about their experience of being cross-examined.
Yeah.
And, that some of them find that quite challenging or quite confronting as well, But I assume they're prepared for that in advance by whoever's helping them, they're representing them. Yeah.
And so back to what I'm curious about, the child psychotherapy in London. Or sorry, it was
at the Tavistock, which is in London. Yeah.
Does that happen here as much or not really?
It does happen. I think it happens. There are people who are very interested in that way of working privately.
Yep.
In the UK, presumably still, and I haven't lived there for a long time, but it was done largely through the NHS.
Okay.
Provided there was a child psychotherapist in that team, wherever that clinic was, London or wherever, and there are people who maybe trained in the UK and who work here now.
Yep.
Not many, but a few.
Yep.
And I believe in Victoria there are people employed in Victoria Health Service as child psychotherapists. I don't think it happens in New South Wales, but I believe it happens in Victoria.
What I'm interested in is the issues there in say the Tavistock clinic that you would witness with those children, and whether they're any different or observably different in terms of issues of Australian children, or whether they're just all children, so they're roughly similar.
Well, it's interesting. I think, for example, when I was earlier on in my career, say 15, 20 years ago, incidents of deliberate self-harm and suicidal ideation in young people, children and young people was fairly rare.
Was it?
But since, particularly, and I worked in a public NSW house here in Sydney, it became sort of the bulk almost of the nature of the work, particularly with the high school age children.
Really?
So that was a huge shift.
Yes.
In a relatively short space of time.
Do you think it's just a societal change?
Well, I think we all really tried, me and my colleagues, we tried very hard to understand what that was. I mean, I think it's hard to think that it's not to do with the coming online of social media and the sort of the relentless nature of peer pressure that is attached to that, because it's very hard to switch off. Even if you want to, it's still very hard because you don't want to feel left out.
For us as adults,
it's hard, isn't it? Yeah. You don't you find yourself thinking, I better check.
Yeah.
And for adolescents in particular, forming their identities in relation to their peers, opting out isn't really an option necessarily. And whether that has directly led to the apparent increase of those kind of issues for that age group is hard to be sure about. But it's also hard not to think that's the case.
It is hard, but it can't be the only thing. I mean,
presumably not, because it's rarely that simplistic an issue. Yeah.
This is the whole sort of question of, it's a very anecdotal and very broad statement, but the whole cost of living and difficulties relating to other families when families are breaking down. I mean, there must be a whole load of issues that are causing now, but is that particular concern of suicidal ideation just as prevalent now as it was when you first arrived? Or even more?
Well, I don't work in those clinics so much, but I don't think it's shifted. I have contact with people who, former colleagues who are still doing that kind of work, and it's something they're sort of working with as regularly as before. And
what about children who are in an otherwise happy situation and then they discover their parents are separating and you then observe them? What are the effects on the children of the separation as far as you can tell? I
think it's a huge rupture to the life they expected and the family they expected they would have. I think, and the parents too, to some degree. There must have been a time when they had assumed, this is my family moving forward. This is our configuration. There's 2 of us, there's 3 of us, there's 4 of us, etc. And when something else, which is often in a state of flux, becomes a new normal, and nobody can really say what that is necessarily for a while, because so many things change so quickly. Children are sort of, they're managing that as best they can, and it's important certain things in their lives don't change, So I know parents go to great lengths to keep schools as they are, keep them at their hobbies and their sporting interests and their extracurricular, commitments and so forth. And that really is important, because the fabric of their lives, which is the family they had always assumed they would have, has suddenly changed, and the ground has moved really quickly underneath their feet. A lot of kids do cope pretty well, but there are quite a few too who find that really hard, and the parents are very mindful of that. And
when they find it hard, a good step then presumably is to get some psychological support from a psychologist or a counsellor.
For many children it's a really helpful resource. It's having someone who's not necessarily, or in their view at least, necessarily partisan. You know, it's not about a loyalty to one parent over the other. They can, and they might have all sorts of other things too that, of course, go on, particularly when they're a bit older. They might not want to share with their parents who they know are going through a difficult divorce, at least in the families I see in my role, who are finding it hard to agree on anything and so forth. Those children need someone who's there for them.
And the experience is as very beneficial. And without it, I'm imagining that can sort of cause ongoing trauma and be unresolved, and later have some sort of corresponding unfortunate consequence if they don't get some extra help.
Look, that's certainly a risk. Yeah, it is. There are some children who might try it, and it's not for them, and it's not for them for a variety of reasons, and that's fine. I think you have to respect that. Or they dip in and out of it. They might see a school counsellor who's there, who's available, who can be, a really helpful person. But sometimes they don't want to mix family and school, so that doesn't work, Sometimes they might go a few times unburdened, and that would be enough. And others then will remain involved for months, sometimes years.
But it's an option because family therapy sort of sits in the realm somewhere as well, doesn't it? Of not a remedy, but a support thing for families separating.
It can do. It can do. I'd say with the parents I see, that usually proves very, very tricky.
Does it? Because they're highly sort of conflicted.
They are. And what the faults, I suppose, they see in the other party, so to speak, are almost at that stage in time feel insurmountable, and it's another avenue in which to vent your frustration. So usually it's about timing. But then again, there are probably plenty of families who I don't see, but who would avail of that and who would find it useful, and actually who I know do find it useful.
Because you're sort of dealing with that group in the society for which they are either in the court or stuck in the court system, and the conflict's extremely high. And I think it's quite a small majority of separating families, but still it's intense.
It is, and there's a sort of a stuckness or an impasse, almost in all aspects. And they can really struggle to agree on anything,
including what time they should have turned up.
Well, absolutely. No Friday, no Thursday, no Friday, but that doesn't last forever.
No.
But I think when you're in the midst of it, it can feel eternal, and that's very hard.
And do you ever see people after the event of a judge handing down the decision and how they cope with that? And I imagine that must be heartbreaking for some people.
I do, and I it's interesting how, there's some families where, even though certain orders were handed down, when that child gets a bit older, they live with who they want to live with. That happens. So I suppose it is ultimately orders not being followed, but it's an adolescent who will vote with their feet, so to speak. And that's interesting.
And there's been changes in the Family Law Act over the last 12 months, and even before that, around things like family violence and
this safety and
coercion and control. Are there behaviours where you can see that is the result of true coercion and control, and then other behaviours where it's not so obvious or it's not happening and it's just a view that is used? Do you ever get stuck in that sort of equation?
Well, that's when I'm very grateful I'm not making any determinations. But I think there are certain behaviours that are often associated with a pattern of coercive control that aren't necessarily to do with the coercive control itself. So you might be looking out for those.
Yeah, and what are they?
For example, what was... let's just say it's a male perpetrator against the female partner. Was there a history of jealousy that predates any actual before the children were born, for example, was their jealousy of the children as babies.
Actual jealousy, someone who truly cannot cope with the idea of something.
Yeah, I'm overlooked. This baby gets too much attention, and that happens, and it happens with siblings. It happens with other parents. But how extreme is it, and what actually happened at that time? Those are the kind of associated behaviours that they're not black and white, and they're not necessarily beyond all reasonable doubt, so to speak.
But they're an indicator.
But they're certainly important to be looking out for. Yeah.
Anything else?
It's always helpful when there's some indication. Helpful, is that the right word? But maybe. You're always interested to find out whether there's contemporaneous evidence of behaviours that you think, they're not outside the realm of actually controlling behaviours, but not retrospectively described, but actually captured. Now that's quite rare, I think, in my experience. But when you see it, I think it's important to draw attention to it because
also, reading an affidavit with a whole load of statements of this happened is one thing. Seeing the human who's written it or who's made the statement is another. And I imagine the person and the way they present and speak and react to you gives you a completely different picture from what you read in an affidavit.
Well, I think you do spend a lot of time listening to people's descriptions of their experiences, and some of them are quite heartfelt, and I suppose you can only respond, or you can describe that in your report, and you can consider and give a view as to what that means.
That's true to them.
Yeah, that's true to them, and presumably when they're maybe in court giving evidence, they might also come across as someone very, very genuine and believable and plausible, and all these sort of complicated issues that the court would have to take into account. But certainly you do get a sense that people believe what they're telling you.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's their lived experience.
And do you think you can tell sometimes whether someone believes it happened and someone who doesn't believe it happened but might decide that it's a sort of tactic? Is that something that is possible to detect as a possibility?
Oh,
this is the last question, because I think we're about to finish, but I'm just curious about how actually whether you can discern.
Well, it's tricky, because I suppose you have to consider, well, has that person learned or managed to cope by distancing themselves from a highly traumatic experience, so they come across as detached and remote and almost a third person description, as opposed to this is a first-hand account, this feels very real almost. So I would say no, it's actually quite hard to draw any firm conclusions at any.
Well, that's consistent actually. I spoke to a former family court judge in this context and asked him whether it was easy to tell whether a witness is not telling the truth, and he said it was actually very difficult.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. Yeah.
So, Emmett, I just want to acknowledge Carpaxis Legal and Cassandra, because
Indeed,
Cassandra Carpaxis does a lot, as in sends work your way, and is a terrific family lawyer in northern Sydney, so acknowledging her for allowing us to do this.
It's great, isn't it, to get the support. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you for asking me.
It's been lovely to meet you. And good
you
chat.
too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.